have gone through this routine, sat through the last Army lecture, signed the last Navy pay voucher, and come home to love and affection.
After World War II, American soldiers were returning home to a growing economy and the desire to settle down.
Nothing like a nice June wedding, but today there's something you've got to take care of before choosing a ring.
But while the country was about to experience an economic boom, there was a severe housing shortage in many cities, including St. Louis, often resulting in cramped apartments and no privacy for recently reunited couples. Developers set their sights on the open land beyond the city lines in an effort to meet this demand for affordable housing.
This story could be about you, your family, your hopes for the future, your home.
The Veterans Administration made guaranteed mortgages possible. So people that really didn't have large bank accounts could borrow the money and start a house. And the developers of the early subdivisions were very much attuned to that. That's one reason why most of the houses in the early subdivisions are quite small.
We were making homes for people that couldn't afford a big house. You know, that was their starter. It was basic.
There were only a few more adventurous builders that were willing to consider modern design. And Ralph Fournier was lucky to be working for a developer who built 3 or 4 major subdivisions during that period.
Fournier was hired by Burton Dinky, who not only owned the construction company, but also Modular Homes, the firm in Kirkwood, Missouri that produced the pre-cut, prefabricated panels used to almost instantaneously create his neighborhoods of pleasant, affordable domiciles.
It was really revolutionary at the time. It allowed the builders to really be cost-effective with their solutions.
And it was easy to work with because we had panels that were 2'4", 4'4", 6'4". So if you wanted to make a bigger building, you could just add either one of those panels.
And so they were able to erect the posts and the beams and the roof, and then come back and dry in the building, erect those panels in about 2 days. He and Burton Dunke walked the neighborhood with a survey crew and sited each house specifically to capture views, to capture natural sunlight. Large glass windows were south-facing if possible, and also to kind of screen privacy for your neighbors. You know, the houses are somewhat close together, so they were very deliberate in where they put those public spaces in one house that were next to, say, a more private space, a bedroom on the adjacent house. Each room really has a great view. They're very connected to the outdoors.
Vertically, because of the high ceilings, you could see the clear stories and see some of the stars at night. Those were other items that went into a lot of those contemporary houses. Bigger windows, not the old-fashioned colonial double-hung windows with bars in them and all that kind of thing. So you could see the outside, and which also makes a room feel larger. It's not any bigger, but it makes it look larger because you don't have a wall to look at.
They did attract people who were interested in modern design, which of course turned out to be a much larger proportion of the population than they anticipated.
You know, there's a lot of young people that at the time that were looking for a new way of living, looking for something more modern. Ralph told me at the time, he said there was probably 10 to 12 other young architects and designers that were first homeowners of these homes. Ralph and Mary Jane being one of them.
The whole subdivision is still pretty much intact. I think there was 250 some odd houses over there, and I don't think there's any new white elephants that have been built.
It's a timeless design. I mean, you know, architects are always looking for spaces with volume and natural light, and I think these homes have that in an economical way.
My grandmother used to tell me that my father knew when he was 5 years old that he wanted to be an architect. It was just, he knew it.
As a freshman at the University of California, Berkeley, Gio Obata was enthusiastically pursuing his lifelong dream of becoming an architect. But the world was at war, and soon, international events would determine the course of his future.
My father was totally focused on architecture school, not paying attention to political and world events. The Japanese were beginning to be segregated out of society in California. And my grandfather told him that he needed to pay attention and try to get outside of California to continue his architectural education. So he looked into WashU because it was the closest architecture school to California at the time. So he applied. I don't think he thought much about it, but then the executive order came out to relocate all the Japanese. A colonel in the Army who was a friend of my grandfather's came one night and said, "Here's a pass for your son, get him out tonight because they're gonna take everyone else tomorrow." And so he got out on a train that night and came to St. Louis. My father's brother and his sister and his parents were all relocated to internment camps the next day. It's amazing that WashU accepted Japanese Americans that were in his class. And my dad has always said that he was so accepted in St. Louis. I think he loves St. Louis, and he's always spoken so highly of St. Louis because it was so welcoming to him at that time.
Obata graduated Washington University in 1945 and went on to be the architectural genius behind the firm HOK. His daughter, Kiku, was a keen observer of her hard-working father and now has her own international design firm, Kiku Obata and Company.
Well, when I was like 5 or 6, I was fortunate to be able to spend a lot of time with my dad. So he would take me to construction sites and take me to his office. I still love the smell of concrete, of freshly poured concrete. It takes me back to those days.
Despite HOK's international fame, Obata's affection for St. Louis is clear through his stunning designs for some of the city's most iconic buildings.
So the Priory took advantage of new construction techniques that happened after the war. I think a lot of contractors were like, "We're not doing this. We have no idea what this is." But I think someone at McCarthy saw those drawings and said, we need to know how to do this. We need to figure this out because this is the future. So they figured out they could build a wooden frame and then spread thin shell concrete over it, and then it would dry, and they would take that form and move it. The forms of Priory really imply, sort of reaching up into the sky, reaching, it's a very spiritual kind of movement. I think what's interesting about Priories, when you look at it from the outside, is that beautiful white form. But the windows look dark, so you really see this contrast of the white concrete shell and then the cow wall window system. But when you go inside, it's like this light-filled space. I love that it has those two different attitudes in a way. It's really one of my favorite buildings.